Good day, everyone. This is Mr. Ian Indahao, and for this episode, I'll be talking about constituency, trees, and rule. But before we take a plunge to the most highlight of this episode, this would be the learning objectives. Be able to explain what a constituent is, show whether a string of word is a constituent or not, using phrase structure rules, draw the trees for English sentences, and explain and apply the principle of modification. Now this time, let's define what is syntax. Syntax is about the study of sentence structure. So let's define what we mean by structure. Consider the sentence in number 1. The student loved his assignment. Notice that on a purely intuitive level, certain words seem to be closely related to one another. For example, the word the seems to be tied more to the meaning of student than it is to loved or syntax. A related intuition can be seen by looking at the sentences in number 2. A. The student loved his phonology readings. B. The student hated his morphology professor. One way to describe the sentence is a simple linear string of words. Certainly, this is how it represented on the page. We could describe the sentence as consisting of the words the student loved his syntax and assignments in that order. As you can probably figure out, if that were all there was to syntax, you could put down this book here and not bother with the next 15 chapters. But that isn't all there is to syntax. The statement that sentence number 1 consists of a linear string of words misses several important generalizations about the internal structure of sentences and how these structures are represented in our minds. In point of fact, we are going to claim that the words in sentence number 1 are grouped into units called constituents, and that these constituents are grouped into larger constituents, and so on until you get a sentence. Notice that on a purely intuitive level, certain words seem to be closely related to one another. For example, the word the seems to be tied more to the meaning of student than it is to loved or syntax. A related intuition can be seen by looking at the sentence in number 2. The student loved his phonology readings. The student hated his morphology professor. Compare these sentences to number 1, you'll see right away that the relationship between the student and his syntax assignments in number 1 and the student and his phonology readings in letter A is the same. Similarly, the relationship between the student and his morphology professor in 2B, while of a different kind, hating instead of loving, is similar. There is one entity, the student, who is either hating or loving another entity, his syntax, assignment, his phonology, readings, or his morphology professor. In order to capture these intuitions, the intuition that certain words are more closely connected than others, and intuitions about relationships between words in the same sentence, we need a more complex notion. The notions we use to capture these intuitions are constituency and hierarchical structure. The idea that the and the student are closely related to one another is captured by the fact that we treat them as part of a bigger unit that contains them, but not other words. We have two different ways to represent this bigger unit. One of them is to put squares bracket around units, the student. The other is to represent the units with a group of lines in what is called a tree structure, the student. These bigger units are called constituents. An informal definition for constituent is given in 5. Constituent, a group of words that function together as a unit. Constituency is the most important and basic notion in syntactic theory. Constituents form the backbone of the rest of this book. They capture the intuitions mentioned above. The relatedness is captured by membership in a constituent. As we will see it also allows us to capture the relationships between constituents exemplified in number 1. Constituents don't float out in space. Instead, they are embedded one inside another to form larger and larger constituents. This is hierarchical structure. Foreshadowing the discussion below a bit, here is a structure well developed for number 1. This is a typical hierarchical tree structure. The sentence constituent represented by the symbol TP consists of 2 constituents, a subject noun phrase or NP, which is the student, and a predicate phrase or verb phrase, loved his syntax assignment. The subject NP in turn contains a noun, student, and a determiner or article the. Similarly, the VP contains a verb and an object NP, which is his syntax assignment. The object NP is further broken down into 3 bits: a determiner, which is his, an adjective, which is syntax, and a noun, which is assignment. As you can see, this tree has constituents, each represented by the point where lines come together that are inside other constituents. This is hierarchical structure. Hierarchical constituent structure can also be represented with brackets. Each pair of brackets represents a constituent. We normally put the label of the constituent on the left member of the pair. The bracketed diagram for number 6 is given in number 7. As you can see, bracketed diagrams are much harder to read. So for the most part, we will use tree diagram in this book. However, sometimes bracketed diagrams have their uses, so you should be able to translate back and forth between trees and bracketed diagrams. Now, we have the tools necessary to develop a simple theory of sentence structure. We have a notion of constituent, which is a group of words that functions as a unit, and we have labels, parts of speech that we can use to describe the parts of those units. Let's put the 2 of these together and try to develop a description of a possible English sentence. In generative grammar, generalizations about structure are represented by rules. These rules are said to generate the tree. So if we draw a tree a particular way, we need a rule to generate the tree. The rules we're going to consider in this chapter are called phrase structure rules, or PSRs, because they generate the phrase structure tree of a sentence. Let's start with the constituents we call noun phrases or NPs and explore the range of material that can appear in them. The simplest NPs contain only a noun, usually a proper noun, plus proper, pronoun plus pronoun, mass noun, count, or a plural noun plus plural. A. John, B. Water, C. Cat. One rule must minimally generate NPs that contain only an N. The format for PSRs is shown in 9a. We use X, Y, and Z here as variables to stand for any category, where 9b shows our first passed at an NP rule. So A. So the label for the constituent, which is the XP, okay, so consists of, as you can see, the symbol, and X, Y, Z, these are the elements that make up the constituents. So in letter B, NP is to N. Now this rule says that an NP is composed of a written as, this arrow here, an N. So this rule would generate a tree like this figure number 10, the NP and N. There are many NPs, example given, those that are plus count, that are more complex than this, of course. A. The box, B. His binder, C. That pink fluffy cushion. We must revise our rule to account for the presence of determiners. A and P to the N, this generates a tree like this figure. So the NP, the N, which is the determiner, and the noun, which is the box. Compare the NPs in number 8 and 11. You'll see that determiners are optional. This being so, we must indicate their optionality in the rule. We do this with parentheses around the optional elements. NP to the determiner and N. Nouns can also be optionally modified by adjectives, so we will need to revise our rule as in number 14, but don't worry about the P in adjective P yet, we'll explain that below. The big box, which is the letter A and letter B, is yellow binder, so NP to D, the adjective PN. Nouns can also take prepositional phrase modifiers. See below where we discuss the structure of these constituents. So once again, we'll have to revise your rule. A, the big box of crayons. B, his yellow binder with a red stripe. NP, adjective P and PP. For concreteness, let's apply the rule in 17. So this would be the figure, or this would be the formula, okay? NPD, adjective P and PP, which is the big box of crayons. So the NP constituents in 18 consists of 4 sub-constituents, the adjective P and PP. For the moment, we need to make one more major revision to our NP rule. It turns out that you can have more than one adjective and more than one PP in an English NP. On the surface, these two NPs look very similar. They both consist of a determiner followed by 2 modifiers and then a noun. But consider what modifies what in these NPs. In 21A, big modifies book as does yellow in 21B. On the other hand, only yellow modifies book. Very does not modify book, very book, it modifies yellow. On an intuitive level then, the structure of these two phrases are actually quite different. 21A has 2 adjective constituents that modify the N, whereas 21B has only one, very yellow. This constituent is called an adjective phrase, so the rule for the adjective phrase is given in 22A. So this is the figure. So A, adjective P, 2, adjective P, adjective P, and then okay, below adjective phrase, adjective, so very yellow. This will give us the following structure for 2 NPs in 21. So the big yellow book. So just study the figure. So despite their surface similarity, these 2 NPs have radically different structures. In 23A, the N is modified by 2 adjective phrase. In 23B by only 1. So this leads us to an important restriction on 3 structure. The adverb very modifies yellow, so it is part of the yellow adjective phrase in 23B. In 23A, by contrast, big doesn't modify yellow, it modifies book, so it is attached directly to the NP containing book. A very similar rule is used to introduce adverb phrases. So adverb phrase, adverb. Very quickly. So just study or just take a look on the figure on the number 27. Here is a common mistake to avoid. Notice that the adverb phrase rule specifies that its modifier is another adverb phrase. Adverb phrase to adverb phrase or to adverb, the rule does not say adverb phrase, adverb, so you will never get trees of the form shown in 28. You might find the tree in 27 a little confusing. There are 2 adverbs and 2 adverb phrases. In order to understand the tree a little better, so let's introduce a new concept, heads. We'll spend much more time on heads in chapter 6 and 7, but here is a first pass. The head of a phrase is a word that gives the phrase of its category. For example, the head of the noun phrase is the noun. The head of PP is the P, the head of the adjective phrase is adjective, and the head of an adverb phrase is adverb. So let's look first at an adjective phrase in 29A and compare it to a complex adverb phrase. So just take a look at the figure. So in 29, the head should be clear. The head should be clear. The adverb is the head of the adverb phrase, and the adjective yellow is the head of adjective phrase. In 29B, we have the same kind of headness, except both elements are adverbs. Very is the head of the lower adverb phrase, and is quickly the head of the higher one. We have 2 adverbs, so we have 2 adverb phrases. Each has its own. Now this time, let's take a plunge to rule number 2, which is on how to draw a tree. You now have the tools you need to start drawing trees. You have the rules and you have the parts of speech. I suspect that you'll find drawing trees much more difficult than you expect. It takes a lot of practice to know which rules to apply and apply them consistently and accurately to a sentence. You won't be able to draw trees easily until you literally do dozens of them. Drawing syntactic trees is a learned skill that needs lots of practice, just like learning to play the piano. There are actually 2 ways to go about drawing a tree. You can start at the bottom and work your way up to the TP, or you can start with the TP and work your way down. Which technique you use depends upon your individual style. For most people who are just starting out at the bottom of the 3 with the words works best. When you become more practiced and experienced, you may find starting at the top quicker. Below, I give step-by-step instructions for both of these techniques. So let's discuss bottom-up trees. This method for tree drawing often works best for beginners. Here are some hopefully helpful steps to go through when drawing trees. Write out the sentence and identify the parts of speech. The determiner, adverb, adjective, noun, verb, determiner, noun. The very small boy kissed the platypus. Number 2, identify what modifies what. Remember the modification relations. If the word modifies something, then it's contained in the same constituent as the thing. So very modifies small, the modifies boy, the platypus modifies kiss. Very small modifies boy, the modifies platypus. So start linking together items that modify one another. It often helps to start at the right edge. Always start with adjacent words, so if the modifier is modifying a noun, then the rule you must apply is in the NP rule. So the very small boy kissed the platypus. So just have to take a look on its figure. Similarly, if the word that is being modified is an adjective, then you must apply the adjective praise rule. So take a look on the figure again. So make sure you apply the rule exactly as it is written. For example, the adjective praise rule reads adjective praise, adjective. This means that the adverb must have an adverb praise on top of it before it can combine with the adjective. Keep applying the rules until you have attached all the modifiers to the modified constituents. Apply one rule at a time. Work from right to left, from the end of the sentence to the beginning. Try doing the rules in the following order. So add adjective phrase and adverb phrase. So we have verb phrases, noun phrases, and PPs, then DTP. If your sentence has more than one clause in it, start with the most embedded clause. So kindly study the figure below. When you have built up the subject, noun phrase, and the verb phrase, apply the TP and if appropriate the CP rule. So this is the most important step of all. Now go back and make sure that your tree is really generated by the rules. Check each level in the tree and make sure your rules will generate it. If they don't, apply the rule correctly and fix the structure. Some important considerations. Letter A, make sure that everything is attached to the tree. B, make sure that every category has only one line immediately on top of it. It can have more than one under it, but only one immediately on top of it. C, don't cross lines. D, make sure all branches in the tree have a part of speech label. And E, avoid triangles. So skill at tree drawing comes only with practice. At the end of this chapter are a number of sentences that you can practice on. I also encourage you to try some of the trees in the workbook. Use the suggestions above if you find them helpful. Another helpful idea is to model your trees on ones that you can find in this chapter. Look carefully at them and use them as a starting point. Finally, don't forget, always check your trees against the rules that generate them. To line or not. In many works on syntax, you'll find trees that have the word connected to the category with a line, rather than writing the word immediately under its category as we have been doing. This is a historical artifact of the way trees used to be constructed in the 1950s. The lines that connect element and trees remain created by a phrase structure rule. There are no phrase structure rules that connect words with their categories. That is, there is no rule verb kiss, so technically speaking, any line between the word's category and the word is incorrect. So correct, noun praise the noun dog. Incorrect, noun praise noun dog. So don't do this. So you have to bear in mind. This method starts out the same way as the other. Write out the sentence and identify the parts of speech. So the very small boy kissed the platypus. Next, draw the TP node at the top of the tree with the subject NP and VP underneath. Using the NP rule, flesh out the subject NP. You'll have to look ahead here. So if there is a P, you'll probably need a PP. Similarly, if there is an adjective, you'll need at least one adjective phrase, maybe more. Remember the principle of modification? So elements that modify one another are part of the same constituent. So just take a look on the figure below. So fill in the adverb phrases, adjective phrases, and PPs as necessary. You may need to do other NPs inside PPs. Next, do constituents inside the VP including object NPs and any EPs and PPs inside them. Again, the most important step is to go back and make sure that your tree obeys all the rules as well as the golden rule of tree structure. Again, I strongly recommend that you start your tree drawing using the bottom-up method, but after some practice, you may find this latter method quicker. Now this time, let's discuss rule number 3 on modification and ambiguity. Syntactic trees allow us to capture another important fact about syntactic structure. Sentences often are ambiguous. Let's start with the following sentence. The man killed the king with the knife. This sentence turns out to have more than one meaning, but for the moment consider only the least difficult reading for it. The phrase it in quotes that follow is called a paraphrase. The man used the knife to kill the king. Remember the principle of modification. Principle of modification revise. If an XP that is a phrase with some category X modifies some head Y, then XP must be sister to Y. That is a daughter of YP. In this first meaning, the PP with the knife modifies killed, so the structure will look like this. So with the knife describes how the man killed the king, it modifies the verb killed, so it is a touch under the VP or the verb phrase. Now consider a paraphrase of the other meaning of 66. The king with the knife was killed by the man who was used a gun. This meaning has the PP with a knife modifying king and thus attached to the NP. So this example illustrates an important property of syntactic trees. Trees allow us to capture the differences between ambiguous readings of the same surface sentence. Now let's discuss our rule number 4 on constituency test. First, the smallest constituent is a single word. So it follows that if you can replace a group of words with a single word, then we know that group forms a constituent. Consider the italicized NP in 70. It can be replaced with a single word, in this case a pronoun. So this is the replacement test. The man from NY flew only ultralight planes, so he flew only ultralight planes. There is one important caveat to the test of replacement. There are many cases in our rules of optional term. Items, those things marked on parentheses like the adjective phrase in NP. So when we replace a string of words with a single word, how do we know that we aren't just living off the optional items? To avoid this problem, we have to keep the meaning as closely related to the original as possible. This requires some judgment on your part. None of these is absolute or foolproof. The second test we'll use is the standalone test, sometimes also called the sentence of fragment test. If the words can stand alone in response to a question, then they probably constitute a constituent. Consider the sentence question, then the sentence is 71A and repeated in 71B. 71A, Paul ate at a really fancy restaurant. B. Paul ate at a really fancy restaurant. If we ask the question, what did Paul do yesterday afternoon? We can answer with the italicized group of words in 74A but not in 74B. Eat at a really fancy restaurant. Neither of these responses proper English in prescriptive terms, but you can easily tell that 74A is better than 74B. Movement is our third test of constituency. If you can move a group of words around in the sentence, then they form a constituent because you can move them as a result or as a unit. Some typical examples are shown in 73. Clefting involves putting a string of words between it was or it is and a dot at the beginning of the sentence. Proposing 73B, also called pseudo-clefting, involves putting the string of words before an is layer, what or is are who at the front of the sentence. We discussed the possessive at length in chapters 9 and 11. Briefly, it involves putting the object in the subject position, the subject in by a phrase after the word, and changing the verb form, for example, from kiss to was kissed. So clefting, it was a brand new car that he bought, from he bought a brand new car. Proposing big bowls of beans, or what I like, from I like big bowls of beans. Possessive, the big boy was kissed by the slobbering dog, from the slobbering dog kissed the big dog. Big boy. Again, the movement test is only reliable when you keep the meaning roughly the same as in the original sentence. Again, the movement test is only reliable when you keep the meaning roughly the same as in the original sentence. Finally, we have the test of coordination, also called conjunction. Coordinate structures are constituents linked by conjunction, like and or. Only constituents of the same syntactic category can be conjoined. A. John and the man went to the store. John and Very Blue went to the store. If you can coordinate group of words with a similar group of words, then they form a constituent. This time, let's have a discussion on the rule number 5, which is on constituency in other languages. There are many languages where the predominant order has heads on the right, that is, are right-headed. Take for example the sentence 75 from Lesgian, a Caucasian language spoken in Azerbaijan. Data from Haspel Math in 1993-2018. In this language, prepositions, or more accurately postpositions, can be after their noun phrase. Dexterin, Pateriu, Fene, doctors to go past, she went to doctors. The phrase structure rule for Lestrian PP is given in 76, where the head P follows the NP rather than preceding. In English, adjectives appear before the noun they modify, but in French, for example, they typically follow the noun they modify. So we'll use a rule like that in 78. Les Gars Bilks, the PL guys, handsome PL, and the handsome guys. And finally, rule number 6 on summary and conclusion. Ideas, rules, and constraints introduced in this chapter. Constituent, a group of words that function together as a unit. Hierarchical structure, constituent in sentence are embedded inside of other constituents, syntactic trees, and bracketed diagrams. These are means of representing constituency. They are generated by rules. English pre-structured rules, CP, CTP, TP, NP, CPT, VP. Okay, so just have to take a look on C and I. Okay, for V, had the word that gives its category to the phrase. Recursion, the possibility of loops in the phrase structure rules that allow infinitely long sentences and explain the creativity of language. The principle of modification, if an XP that is a phrase with some category X modifies some head Y, the next P must be a sister to Y. That is a daughter of YP. And constituency tests that show that a group of words function as a unit. There are 4 major constituency tests given here: movement, coordination, standalone, and replacement. So that ends this first episode. So for the next episode, I'll be discussing on head-to-head movement. That's for next episode. And for episode 3, advanced topics and binding theory. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you gain or you acquired knowledge for this episode. Bye!